So in this video, I'm going to present some information about the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Justice Framework. To begin, just to understand the purpose of the framework or what this is, it is a tool for Columbus School stakeholders in line with our purpose that students are agents of positive change. The framework provides 5 measurement topics, central measurement topics that address how to intentionally prepare learners with the knowledge and tools to engage with difference, address injustice, take collective action towards social equity, skills that they will all need in today's diverse and ever-changing world. The framework provides specific learning principles for each measurement topic, and it seeks to provide a clear continuum and the common language that supports K through 12 staff as well as others in creating learning experiences within their curriculum through a lens of diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice. You will see that came here directly from page 1 of the framework, which is linked as well into the agenda. These are the 5 measurement topics. So the idea is that these are the 5 areas of study: how students study identity, they study inclusion, they study systems and equity, justice, and action. Within each of these 5 areas is language of, specific learning principles, such as you see here, identity, inclusion, systems, justice, and action. This was developed through various iterations. I developed it using these sources that are linked here, and then it was brought to a variety of different eyes for feedback iteration. It went through the student committee, it went through different points, it went through staff committee, the diversity, equity, inclusion staff committee. I also just met with teachers throughout the school to from K through 12 in different grade levels to get feedback just on language and trying to make sure that this was something that felt accessible to our whole community. The framework is rooted in a lot of research, and that's kind of like the why. Each of these items is linked, so you can read the article, the research article that it comes from, but it's really this idea that, one, why do we do justice work in schools? There's a couple of things. One, that discrimination is harmful to students' mental health, and so we want to make sure that we create spaces that honor our students, and in order to do that, these spaces have to be both inclusive and create a sense of belonging. We also know that it's not just about what our students experience, but what our students can cause. So there's quite a lot of evidence about how children learn racism early, yet it's never too early to combat gender or sexual orientation bias, and some other articles here about the value of this type of work, and some other key insights. This is an interesting image, and all of this is linked here, but it talks about, and specifically in relationship to just racism and systems of white supremacy, children begin to learn about race and start to respond to race as early as 2 years old, which this article, if you read about it in the research, that's normal. It's normal that students' brains would compartmentalize that people who look like them or who look like their parents are what they gravitate towards, yet without any sort of work around combating systems of bias, students as early as 4 and 5 begin to express racial prejudice, and that is because they see examples of dominant narratives that show racial preference or racial hierarchy, and so it starts to confirm any notions around race that were in their mind beforehand. But this image also connects to some other research that shows that explicit conversations around interracial friendships or around racial attitudes can show improvement as much as a single week. And so there's a lot of research just around the value of doing this work in schools. This is particularly just about systems of combating racism, but there's a myriad of research articles. Again, you'll have access to this if you're interested, about this idea of there being dominant narratives or there being messaging that students are exposed to in our society that create hierarchies, whether they're racial hierarchies, gender hierarchies, sexuality hierarchies, and things that create this idea of what is normative and what is not, and students ingest those messages. And so unless schools are deeply intentional about combating them, we are essentially complicit in the creation of biases that can turn into active discrimination. So there's some research there if you're interested. Ultimately, the idea of the framework, if I go back to it, is it allows for the intentional preparation of skills that students need to be able to combat bias, to be able to recognize bias, to be able to engage with difference, and to address injustice. How does this impact vertical alignment? Well, the tool in and of itself moves us closer to the intentionally aligned approach to justice work in education. The idea of the tool is that eventually, with time, it's something that we can use as a way to strategically see where throughout the school, K through 12, we can see tracking different units that are using this lens and that are having these conversations. So we can see that students are actually having that aligned, intentional approach to justice. So it provides that strategic thinking and that strategic tracking to know that our conversations around justice work, around diversity, around equity, around inclusion are not in isolation, but they're happening throughout various moments in our students' K through 12 experience. How does this change impact staffing and or curriculum resources? As far as staffing, I think that I would note that it's probably important, or it's definitely important, the continued role of a DEIJ coach or a point person to be responsible of that strategic tracking and to strategically manage and seeing, okay, where have we been able to integrate this in 3rd grade? Have we been able to integrate this in 7th grade? Where have we integrated in the 11th grade courses or in the science courses of middle school? And really be the person who is managing how this framework is being used across the classrooms. I would also add that perhaps more DEI training for instructional coaches so that all instructional coaches can be a part of providing coaching cycles or helping with co-constructing lesson plans in relationship to the framework. And I think that that is something that I would note as a possible change for staffing or curriculum resources. As far as how does this change support our TCS purpose and vision, there are 4 things in our purpose and vision. I've highlighted, I think, obviously, especially this moves us closer to ethical global citizens who are agents of positive change. I think that it is disingenuous and naive to consider anyone ethical or global or an agent of positive change who doesn't have an understanding of inclusion, diversity, justice. I think that those are foundational ideas in order for our students to be ethical global citizens of agents of positive change. I also think that this actually supports that they're enterprising and empowered students that are able to thrive in an ever-changing world. The world is constantly, particularly for our students, moving at a different pace in terms of the conversations around justice and around social justice, and they're constantly exposed to that via social media or Twitter or other things, or Instagram and TikTok, and even just like the real world, having these conversations outside of that expose them to reality sort of outside of maybe what is often referred to as like the bubble, or a protected bubble where maybe some of these issues aren't as prevalent to them because they're not their lived experience, but having a strategic way where our curriculum prepares our students to see the realities of injustice, but also to radically dream about justice, prepares them to be students who can thrive in an ever-changing world. And of course, I think this obviously aligns with critically conscious citizens. When we think about a sense of responsibility towards global sustainability not simply referring to environmental sustainability, but sustainability of people, sustainability of humanity. And there's so many systems that we operate from currently that require the oppression of a given class, and having an exposure to DEIJ frameworks and ability to think and critically about those systems and whether or not those systems are sustainable in their oppressions and how to transform those systems if they're not, is something that the DEIJ framework provides for our students, and therefore provides them the opportunity to be critically conscious citizens.